On this episode of Geek Dad Life, we're going to review the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive TMNT Ultimates Bug Zapper Blue, aka glow-in-the-dark Baxter Stockman by Super7. Hey everybody, and welcome to Geek Dad Life. It's your host, Jay Gladfelter here. One of my most highly anticipated toy lines of 2020 is Super7's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ultimates. I love what they have done, kind of continuing the legacy of the Masters of the Universe classics. And now they're setting their sights on one of my favorite toy lines of all time, Playmates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While the first wave of figures that includes Raphael, Master Splinter, a foot soldier, and a normal version of this Baxter Stockman mold is now shipping, I am still waiting on my delivery from Big Bad Toy Store. So this figure is my first one in hand from this line. I'm really excited. This Bug Zapper Blue Baxter Stockman was Super7's San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. And due to the fact that the physical Comic-Con didn't happen this year, they released this one online. And honestly, it was one of the best exclusive purchase experience I've had in 2020. So kudos to the Super7 team, everybody that put a lot of work into their stay-at-home-a-con sales experience, because it was fantastic. I'm excited that they chose to go with Baxter Stockman for this Comic-Con exclusive, mainly because he's a very monstrous and kind of just grotesque character from the second series of figures that were released in 1989. And given that he's a more monstrous figure, this is where the Four Horsemen have always shined. Now, I have already reviewed another Ultimates figure from Super7. That was the Toxic Crusaders Toxie figure released a few months ago. The form and function of this box is identical to previous Ultimates releases like the Toxie and Conan the Barbarian figures. It features a brown shipper box, a trapezoidal frame with a sleeve that reveals a window box showcasing the figure. The outside sleeve features artwork unique to the Turtles line, with the front featuring a manhole cover with Baxter Stockman front and center, with two Mousers at its side. There's also a burst that is glow in the dark. On the top you have the Ultimates logo, and on the back you have the classic 80s style Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles logo with a burst that is also glow in the dark. Underneath you have the classic Turtles brick motif, this one being more glow in the dark, very blacklight focus, a lot of graffiti on the bricks. And then you also have the Turtles logo, Baxter Stockman underneath, and on the back you have a little bio for Baxter Stockman with the Super7 and Nickelodeon logos underneath. Taking this figure out of the box, I was immediately blown away by the heft and just the enormity of this figure in hand. It might be just my years of owning the original vintage Baxter Stockman, which is in about that 5-inch scale, a little bit smaller than Motu, but bigger than a 4-inch figure. But this is truly a 7-inch kind of Motu classic scaled figure, and it is a sight to behold in hand. The figure stands head to toe at about 6.5 inches, and then with its wingspan, that can add another 2 inches, putting it, in total around 9 inches. While this figure can stand more upright than the vintage one, it is hard to imagine this Baxter Stockman not in that crouched, insect-like pose. This figure has 22 points of articulation, 8 of those coming from his wings and arms on his back, which is double the amount of joints that we got on the original vintage figure, and they are awesome. With ball joints at the wings and multiple ball joints on the arms, you can really get him in a lot of cool poses behind the actual arms and hands of the main figure. It's just a really, really nice add here. Love the sculpting and work that they've done with the articulation. Speaking of sculpting, it is on par with the best of what the Four Horsemen have to offer. Something that was always great and is still great about the vintage Playmates line is all of the sculpted details. Like, there's just so many little Easter eggs and so many details that just shine through on those vintage figures. And I love how what the Four Horsemen have done with this Baxter Stockman is echo so much of what made the sculpting on those original figures great, but added them in this modern context. And it just looks fantastic from head to toe. All of the little veins, all of the bumps in his eyes, to his accessory with the turtle smashed on there. It's just, I absolutely love the sculpting of this figure, and it is absolutely up there with some of the best of Four Horsemen's work. Looking at the paint, there's probably less here than will be on the main release figure for Baxter Stockman, mainly because of the glow-in-the-dark feature. You really want that to shine through, but at no point do I feel like this thing is missing out on any paint details. Really love all of the painted veins on here, really helps it pop. I love the pearlescent paint on his lab coat, it really shines through. And even on the accessories, the little painted turtle looks fantastic. And comparing it to what I'm seeing on the main release, his little ray gun actually has a painted cap on its end, unlike the main release, which does not have paint. I also love the silver paint on his toes and his nails on his kind of back wing claws. And I also love his little painted detail on his wedding ring. I think that looks great. And also his like darker blue painted fingernails, the bright red of his eyes, the silver that surrounds it, the puff of blue hair versus his orange red hair. It looks fantastic. Like no slop here. Every detail is perfect. Not any QC paint issues on my example. Taking a closer look at those aforementioned accessories, the great thing about at least what I've seen so far from this line is we're getting a boatload of accessories to go with this great figure. Now we are matching what the vintage one came with that kind of mechanized fly swatter, but instead of a fly, we have a poor little baby turtle smashed on there, a detail that carries over from its vintage counterpart. It also has the weird little arm wrist attachment to that fly swatter. Now, my vintage example does not have one, but on the vintage ones, it would attach over the forearm. The one thing here is it's sculpted way too thin for it to ever fit on this Baxter Stockman's forearm. So that's an interesting thing there. The gun can actually kind of fit into it, so I was wondering if maybe that was why it was that thin, but still. So it's a little weird. It doesn't work perfect, but still I think overall it looks fantastic. Again, the kind of ray gun looks great. And what I love about what it seems like they're doing with this line is we're also getting the kind of weapons rack like the vintage figures came with, in addition to all the unattached accessories that we're getting. So it's a really neat little add-on here, but one little nitpick is that I wish they maybe made the base kind of have enough legs so it would stand up on its own. I couldn't get it to stand up on its own successfully after trying many times. So just something, maybe they can fix that down the line. Now, this also comes with multiple hand accessories, 6 in total beyond the trigger fingers that are attached with it. You have closed fists, open hands, as well as kind of a tighter gripped hand versus the trigger fingers that are attached in the box. And then the big accessory that this Baxter Stockman figure comes with is a Mauser. Yes, his most famous invention is included here, but also casted in that blue glow-in-the-dark plastic. He is scaled up a little bit bigger than, in my mind, what the actual Mauser would be, but it is in no way as badly out of scale as the vintage Mauser figure. I think it looks great. It looks like it popped right off of screen. It has 4 points of articulation with 2 at the legs. You have the hinged jaw as well as a cut neck joint. I wish it was a ball joint though. I think it would have gotten a lot more range of motion. The little Mausers that came with the 2012 line were great. It just had like one little ball joint at the head and you could just get so many dynamic poses out of it. Bummer that's not the case here, but maybe down the line we can get maybe a Mauser pack that'll have variations on the articulation that'll give some more display options. Going side by side to the vintage Baxter Stockman, you can see how well it echoes that vintage figure while being its own new thing. I think I am just really pumped for the potential for this TMNT Ultimates line. I love the Masters of the Universe Classics line, mainly because it kind of gave us modern, updated takes on the amazing vintage figures, and the Four Horsemen and Super 7 are looking to do this with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was, you know, second to Ghostbusters in my childhood love. So really excited how well this thing looks. I'll be even more excited to get the colorways that match the vintage figure, but still, I love the glow-in-the-dark feature on this Baxter Stockman. Looking at that glow-in-the-dark feature, it is a Bug Zapper blue. It is a blue glow-in-the-dark figure, when most, maybe even especially in my experience from a vintage perspective, it's more of that classic green glow-in-the-dark look. But this blue just looks really cool, especially when I'm filming it with my camera. I will say the blue takes longer to charge in my experience than the vintage classic green glow-in-the-dark. I had to leave it in front of a light a lot longer than my vintage glow-in-the-dark figures. Speaking of those vintage glow-in-the-dark figures, why don't we compare it as well with some of my favorite 80s and 90s glow-in-the-dark figures, like Scareglow, Ectoglow Peter Venkman, and Kenner's glow-in-the-dark Night Fighter RoboCop figure. You can see how different and kind of stunning this blue is compared to the vintage. While I might have a bigger and more special place in my heart for that classic green glow-in-the-dark, I really love the look and feel of the blue of this Baxter Stockman figure. And I think, you know, if you have a cool blacklight setup, this thing would really, really shine. Overall, I really like the figure. When this line was first announced, I was a little concerned with the price point. You know, if you're looking at a 4-figure series, almost $200 to get the whole wave, it's a really large price, a really heavy price tag to take on if you're going to collect this line. But having it in hand, it really is a premium figure with modern articulation, fantastic Four Horsemen sculpting, and pitch-perfect paint applications. I think it's well worth the price tag. You're getting all these great accessories, and it just looks great in hand. Like, I'm so pumped to get that first wave of Super 7's TMNT Ultimates figures. All that being said, this figure absolutely gets the Geek Dad Life buy rating, even though it is sold out. Hopefully the secondary prices won't stay too high and you'll be able to get this figure and add it to your collection. And for those that are getting that first wave of this toy line, I'm jealous of you, and hopefully my set won't be too far behind. I can't wait to review it on this channel. So if you want to see my future reviews of these figures, definitely hit like, hit subscribe, and click on that bell icon to be notified when the latest episode of Geek Dad Life drops. Definitely check out some other videos on my channel, like one of my most recent videos, as well as this one YouTube wants you to check out. And until next time, hasta luego, and goodbye.